Yes, friends, thank you for joining us today on our another live LinkedIn podcast, Tactics versus Strategy. We have been talking about the three-dimensional negotiation, of course, technical, strategic, and tactical, and what's going on in the United States and in the whole world, and how does that impact our businesses. Today, we are going to talk about really, can tactics hide technical failures? If we have really inherent flaws in our strategy, then can really tactics overcome that? Certainly, we know that the answer is no. However, we are going to analyze our current, Iran war situation in this whole scenario. So, as you have seen, that basically we have been flip flopping. We have been going back and forth, forcing, pushing, and then pulling, pushing, pulling, push-pull strategy. That reminds me of supply chain. That how you can push your product up, really create a pull strategy that the customer really wants your product. So over here, we have been really doing push-pull strategy, and that's all. Push-pull strategy is okay if we have the technical understanding of the issue, and we have technical soundness, and then we have a strategic direction. It seems to me that we are really playing all this without really sound technical analysis or really long-term strategy. We are really doing all that based on tactics. And as I have told you, my personal experience with President Trump and analyzing his entire a negotiation strategy, he's all about tactics. In my humble opinion, tactics are important, but if they are played without really understand your technical capabilities, understanding all stakeholders' technical capabilities and strategies, then honestly, your tactics alone will not survive and will not create a success. So, as you have seen just today in Wall Street Journal, in New York Times, that basically reality is that we are falling short on our interceptors, but we are actually calling this again that, okay, we like to talk again because Iran is approaching again, and maybe we can really give diplomacy another chance. Reality is we have been stopping and going forward because we really have a very miscalculation in Iran's capability of their missiles, not only the technical ability of their missiles and their stockpile. The biggest question is really, what is their stockpile? We test every single time with shock and awe, and we think that this is really, that's it. Their nation is going to collapse, their city is going to collapse, their army is going to collapse, and then most importantly, they're going to, have no more stockpile of missiles. And then we sometimes think it's coming from Russia, China, and other sources. But the reality is we need to understand that Iran really, prepared for itself for 20 plus years for this war. And now we can understand why Iran was not eager to sign a deal. Because they also understand that if we really sign a deal without really some guarantees and some, practical solutions, then it would be very short-lived. And, America and Israel will build their stockpile and then they'll come back again. They understood this very, very clearly. Whereas we did not understand our stockpile, our cost, and our, implications of the war, and then also the political arena in this whole war. So as you see that every now and then we try to talk about dialogue, and then we bring in our allies, and they bail us out, and then we, get the spoiler, which is Israel, because it is in their interest that the war continue, but it is in Iran's best interest that they basically have a conclusive war, because they know their better alternate than negotiable agreement is not having any contract. Why? because they rather not have a contract where they give time to their quote-unquote army, and they rather have, a situation where they have some control on Strait of Hormuz. Because they know once they lose the control on Strait of Hormuz, then they are history. And they cannot really sustain without really, their control on Strait of Hormuz, not just economically, but also geopolitically as well. So for that reason, they really need to keep that control at every cost. And then they really will allow Strait of Hormuz to operate if they get an amicable deal. And if they don't get an amicable deal, they'd rather kind of fight it out than they give it away. Because really, this is their survival game. So Iran's survival is that they either get a decent deal or keep fighting, having no contract. That is their bet now. Whereas Israel's only bet now is that the war continues and they really have a dominance in this region. Now, I think now you can also see why US has told Israel to not join this recent attack is because they know that Israel needs a big stockpile for interceptors. And if Israel is not attacking, Iran probably won't attack Israel. And hence, the stockpile of interceptors will not be needed over there. But, Trump really announced a few days ago, we're going to really, again, give a peace a chance, and they're going to, again, bring in, my dear Field Marshal Asim Munir. Now, Asim Munir is another dictator in Pakistan who's running the Shah, and dictators need some sort of confidence from the world and from the, biggest economy. They need a confidence from Trump, and Trump needs their help to help kind of delay and do these type of tactics. So it's kind of very interesting that how different powers are using each other at different power centers, and dictators are using each other. So Iran knows that what Pakistan is doing, but then since they are neighbors, they have to keep it cordial. They have to give each other a chance. But at the same token, they both know that what is in it for each one of them. So they know their stakeholder analysis. Pakistan know that they need to keep somewhat cordial with Iran and with Saudi Arabia and rest of the Gulf countries. And then they also have to keep very, very cordial with China and US. So Pakistan is in a pretty hard situation. Then, of course, Kuwait is in a very similar situation, but it's not, as hard as even Pakistan. And then when you go into US, of course, Trump really needs these leaders to help him out whenever he needs it. And that also is helping actually his strategy on, running the stock market, because the stock market love change. And every time the change occurs, his friends really benefit from it. And, the stock market has been doing great with this change. And so he doesn't mind. But the biggest problem is the long-term economic and moral standing of the United States. Because these tactics might not hurt the short term, but the long term is really, really bad. Because if we lose the moral ground in the world, and also if we lose our technical dominance in the world, because while we are doing this, there are powers who are very keenly observing, powers like China and Russia, and especially China. China is keep developing new technologies. And they've tested out those technologies through Pakistan-India war. And they have kind of proven the world that they are technically sound. If you look at their AI papers, and if you look at how many researchers they are, inviting, I mean, most of the research papers nowadays are coming from China, believe it or not. And the AI progress in all those new minds, fresh minds, where, we, on the other hand, that's another thing President Trump has done. They really made it very difficult for international students and researchers to come to the United States. And by doing so, He may be making some factions of mega happy that I'm very patriotic. I want the US citizens to benefit, not the foreigners. But don't forget, we were attracting the whole world's best brains. And if that stops and somebody else open that and welcome those people in their countries like China and Germany and others, think what's going to happen in the long term. So we really are playing tactics in every direction. There seems to be short of technical analysis and long-term strategy based on technical analysis. And that might make the faction of a mega happy or MAGA happy, however you want to pronounce it, make America great again. So the MAGA might think that this is great, it's very patriotic, but the reality is it is very, very short-sighted because you are closing your doors to all the best of the world. And while somebody else is opening those doors, so what's going to happen? I mean, look at the automotive industry in China. Why don't we not allow Chinese car manufacturers to come here when Japanese and Germans and others, openly come? Because we are open market. But we are now worried about Chinese cars. Their prices are fraction of the cost of our prices, and their car perform far, far better. And you will see what will happen in Canada because Canadian market is open to it. Canadian market is much, much smaller than US market. But reality is that they are right in our neighborhood, and people will be driving and people will be testing, and there will be a lot of pressure. And honestly, I envision that sooner or later, US has to open that market, because if we really want, AI-driven technologies and non-fossil fuel, I don't think we'll have a solution internally. We're going to have to open the market. And so we were best in developing best of the best technologies in the United States and then selling the high-end technologies to the whole world. And now we are closing gates on those researchers and those brains who are developing those technologies. And then we kind of have an aging infrastructure as well. Guess what's going to happen in the long term? So it's very, very important that we understand and analyze any situation in business or even in war technically, and then have our strategy built based on that tactics and then execute it, with all these three dimensions. And that's what I have been talking about, that it's not one-dimensional approach. It has to be with sound technical analysis and technologies. It has to be with the long-term strategy, and sometimes you have to step back to move forward. You have to lose battle to win war. And then basically you can play tactics to make it efficient and cordial, and not really make it really just a push strategy. You got to really have some pull. United States had pull strategy for a long time. People were inviting United States. People were inviting United States technologies, United States companies, United States government to solve their problems. Now we are shoving and pushing these things to Gulf countries, whether that is a $1 trillion investment from Saudi Arabia, which I don't know if it's going to happen or not, whether that is really trying to sell our planes and our ammunition and our technologies. But we know more and more and more Chinese technology is becoming very popular, and they're a fraction of the cost. And then, honestly, first time in the U.S. history, even U.S. dollar is having a competition with yuan. And people are thinking about, especially the Gulf nations are thinking about doing their trade in yuan and those type of things. So somebody said it very nicely that Trump got the best deal, which was negotiated by J.D. Vance, but unfortunately, he blew it out because of two reasons. One, Israel, who's the biggest spoiler, like I was telling you, and also his personal kind of desire to be a big man and always use tactics and feel that he kind of somehow he won this whole war. So it may be the best time right now to step back and think long term and try to think big and act small instead of just acting small and thinking big. Instead of just talking big and not having any true technical sound strategy at all. So I think what I'm trying to gain here is that if you believe in your tactics, you must understand your stakeholders' technical abilities and have a sound strategic vision, direction, platform in an analysis that really execute properly. And that is possible if you are more realistic and have these three dimensions in mind instead of just playing tactics. Until next time, God bless you all, and we'll continue this series and discuss further. Thank you.